Officer Shateri, Elise Payne, badge 1588. Thank you for your honor, your loyalty, integrity, commitment, and your dream. Thank you for your service to the city of Shreveport, your neighboring communities, agencies, and the United States of America. You've made the people proud, your family, your officers. We're so proud. Your sacrifices will not be forgotten. We have the watch now. Rest in peace. Officer Shateri Elise Payne, badge 1588, code 8, forever.
January 9th, 2019, Shreveport, Louisiana, 1600 block of Midway Avenue, Caddo Heights neighborhood, 8:18 in the evening. A 22-year-old woman steps out of the front door of her home, uniform pressed, badge pinned, keys in hand. She is headed to work. Her night shift starts soon. She has a 2-year-old daughter sleeping inside that house. She has a career she fought for. She has a future she earned. 54 days into living it, she never made it off the driveway. 3 shots fired from a waiting car. 1 bullet entered the back of her head. Her name was Shateri Elise Payne. She was a Shreveport police officer, and the man who picked up his phone minutes later and called 911, the man who told dispatchers his girlfriend had been shot, was the same man who, the night before, sent a text message that read, "Let's knock it out tomorrow." Welcome to Hidden Motive Crime. If you're new here, subscribe and turn on that notification bell. This channel exists for one reason: to bring you the details others leave behind and the truths that deserve to be heard. If you're coming back, welcome home. Today we walk through a house on Midway Avenue in Shreveport, Louisiana, and we are not leaving until we know exactly what happened to Officer Shateri Payne. 5 facts under 60 seconds. Pay attention. Fact 1. Shateri Payne had been a sworn Shreveport police officer for less than 54 days when she was killed. Fact 2. Her 2-year-old daughter was inside the house when the shots were fired. Fact 3. The man who called 911 to report her death was her boyfriend. To Travion Anderson, and prosecutors would later prove in a court of law that he arranged every step of it. Fact 4. Shateri had already put down a deposit on a new apartment. She was supposed to pick up the key on January 15th. She was killed on January 9th. 6 days. That is how close she was. Fact 5. She was on the phone with her grandmother, Pamela Wilson, as she walked to her patrol car. The line was muted. Pamela heard nothing. Not the footsteps, not the car, not the shots. Nothing. She did not know her granddaughter was already gone. Travion Anderson told police a man in white clothing, a stranger, had shot Shateri. He said he chased the man and fired back. That story began falling apart before the sun came up on January 10th. Drop a candle in the comments right now for Officer Shateri Payne. She deserves to be remembered, not just as a case number, but as the woman she was. November 16th, 2018, the Shreveport Police and Fire Training Academy, graduation day. A 22-year-old woman stands in uniform for the very first time. She is beaming. Her classmates are cheering around her. Her mother, Lakeitha Nash Hudson, is somewhere in that crowd, watching her firstborn child take the steps she had worked for. That same evening, Shateri went home and opened Facebook. She typed these words herself, and they are still there, preserved for anyone who wants to find them. Long days, aching nights, but I decided to stand tall on my dream. My personal mission is to become that positive influence, to protect those who can't protect themselves. It is an honor to be able to join such a powerful family with my brothers and sisters in blue. May the journey begin. Read that again slowly. Every word of it. She was not handed anything. She had been hired by the Shreveport Police Department on July 27, 2018.
What can you tell
She
us?
spent months in training. She crossed the finish line on November
Alex,
16th and stepped directly into field patrol. Her first field training officer, a man who had trained many officers before her, later told investigators in sworn testimony entered into court record that Chatteri was better than most of the people he had trained. She picked up on everything so quick. She was good at this. She was built for it, and she was more than a badge number. She was a mother. Her daughter, a little girl, 2 years old, was at home waiting for her every time she came off shift. She was a daughter herself. She called her mother Lakeitha every single day, not occasionally, not when she had time. Every day, she was a granddaughter. She called her grandmother Pamela Wilson regularly, just to talk, just to check in. She had a plan for her life, a clear one. Wear the uniform, raise her daughter, and quietly, carefully, leave the relationship she had been trapped in for 3 years. That last part was the one she had not yet managed to do. If you are watching this right now and you know someone pouring everything they have into a dream the way Chatteri was, tell them, whatever you would have said to her, leave it in the comments, because she deserved to hear it. Now we go to the other side of the front door on Midway Avenue. Trevion Anderson, 26 years old in January 2019, 3 years into a relationship with Chatteri Payne, the father of her 2-year-old daughter. She, by every outward appearance, a partner, a father, a man sharing a home with the woman he was supposed to love. That is the surface. What was happening inside that house is documented in hundreds of pages of sworn witness statements and court filings obtained from Caddo Parish District Court. And what those pages describe is control. Systematic, grinding control. Chatteri's mother, Lakeitha Nash Hudson, told investigators that Anderson treated her daughter poorly. He accused Chatteri of being unfaithful. He took her cell phone away. He refused to allow her friends inside the home. He managed her movements, her access, her world. At some point during her time on the force, Chatteri's police radio was damaged. A colleague noticed it was broken and asked her about it. She looked at him and said, "This is a direct quote entered into investigation records. Let's just say I sat on it and leave it at that." She was covering for him, protecting a man who was controlling every corner of her life, still protecting him. Her colleagues saw what she was carrying even when she tried to hide it. Corporal Stephen Gibson told investigators that Chatteri came to him and confided directly. She did not want to marry Trevion Anderson. She wanted out of the house. Gibson said he could hear the emotion in her words, in the urgency beneath them. He offered to help her search for apartments himself. Detective Gatson told investigators that at the Independence Bowl game, Chatteri told him Anderson had been unfaithful to her and that she was actively looking for a new place to live. His advice to her was simple and direct. Get out of that situation. She was listening. She was moving. She had already mapped out the exit, but Trevion Anderson had already mapped out something else entirely. In December 2018, just weeks before January 9th, Chatteri spoke to her grandmother, Pamela Wilson, and she told her something that Pamela later repeated to investigators, word for word. She said Anderson had threatened her, that he had told her he would kill her first before he let her leave. She told her grandmother. She was not imagining it. She was not exaggerating. She repeated the exact words he used, and then she kept going to work. Kept raising her daughter, kept putting one foot in front of the other, because she was already in motion toward the door. She just did not know how little time she had left. Remember that threat, because in exactly 3 weeks, Trevion Anderson made good on every word of it, and he did not do it alone. I want to ask you something, and I want a real answer in the comments. Have you ever watched someone stay in a situation where every warning sign was visible to everyone around them and felt completely powerless to pull them out? What do we actually do? How do we help people leave safely? Because Chatteri had people around her who cared, and it still wasn't enough. Tell me what you think below. By late December 2018, Chatteri Payne had made up her mind. She found an apartment. She paid the deposit with her own money. The key was hers to collect on January 15, 2019. A new address, a new chapter, a front door that only she controlled. She was not keeping it a secret. She told her colleagues at the Shreveport Police Department. She told her mother, Lakeitha Nash Hudson. She told her grandmother, Pamela Wilson. The people closest to her knew she was leaving Trevion Anderson, and she had a date to do it. January 15th, 6 days after January 9th. She would never see January 15th because Trevion Anderson knew she was leaving. And what Anderson did with that knowledge, what he put into writing, into text messages, into conversations with people he trusted, would later be read aloud in a courtroom in Caddo Parish. A friend of Anderson's took the stand at trial and told the jury that in December 2018, Anderson sent him text messages. In those messages, Anderson said he wanted to kill Shateri Payne. And the reason he gave was the same reason prosecutors had been building their case around from the beginning. She was planning to leave him. Defense attorneys objected to that testimony. Judge John Mosley let it stand. The jury heard every word. Anderson needed more than intention. He needed people. This is where Lawrence Pierre enters the story. Pierre was Anderson's cousin, 22 years old. He was not a stranger to Anderson. He was family, close family, the kind of person you call when you need something handled without going outside your circle. And then there was Glenn Frierson, 38 years old, a family connection to Anderson as well. Two men recruited quietly, brought into a plan that was being constructed inside the same walls where a 2-year-old girl went to sleep every night. Think about that. The same house. See, the same driveway she walked to every shift. The same address she was about to escape from. Legally, cleanly, with a key in her hand. He was turning it into the place where she would die. Anderson would make one critical mistake in all of this. Actually, he made several. But the one that would seal his fate was the device he carried in his pocket every day. His phone was recording everything. Every movement, every message, every search. He had no idea how much of it would survive, or how clearly it would tell the story of what he had planned. The first week of January 2019, Shateri Payne was still showing up to work, still performing. Her supervisors had no complaints. Her field training officer had already told investigators she was ahead of where most new officers stood at her stage. She was calling her mother Lakeitha every day. She was checking in with her grandmother Pamela. From the outside, she looked like a young woman on her way somewhere good. And she was. She just needed 14 more days. January 8th, 2019, the night before the murder. Lawrence Pierre sends a text message to Trevion Anderson. 5 words. Let's knock it out tomorrow. Prosecutors would later call that text message the spine of their entire case. It was sent the evening before Shateri Payne was shot in her own driveway. It was recovered from Pierre's phone. It was presented to the jury. And it said everything that needed to be said about what the following night was going to bring. January 9th, 2019. Shateri wakes up. She gets dressed. She pins her badge. She pulls on the uniform she had earned through months of long days and aching nights. Her own words. She is scheduled for the night shift. Before she leaves, she says goodbye to her daughter, 2 years old, unaware of anything except that her mother is heading out to work again. Shateri walks toward the front door. She steps outside. She has her keys. She has her radio. She is on schedule. Around 8 p.m., she pulls out her phone and calls her grandmother, Pamela Wilson, just to talk. Just the two of them, the way they always did. The call connects. The line at some point goes to mute. She walks toward her patrol car in the driveway. And at this exact moment, while she is on the phone with the woman who loved her, while her daughter is inside the house, while her new apartment key is 6 days away, 3 men are within reach of that same driveway. Bossier Parish Sheriff's Captain Shannon Mack, a digital forensics expert, later analyzed the cell phone data from Trevion Anderson, Lawrence Pierre, and Glenn Frierson. Her testimony in court was precise. 30 minutes before the shooting, all 3 men were at or near the house on Midway Avenue. Their phones placed them there. Their text messages placed them there. They were not passing through. They were coordinating, tracking Shateri's movements in real time, message by message, minute by minute. She did not know. She was talking to her grandmother about her evening. At 8:18 p.m., Shateri Elise Payne was shot in the driveway of her own home. 3 times, once in the back of the head. Her grandmother Pamela Wilson was still on the line. The line was muted. Pamela heard nothing. I want you to sit with that for a moment. And then I want you to go to the comments and tell me, If you were Pamela Wilson, and on that call, hearing silence, and then hours later learning what that silence meant, what do you imagine goes through a person's mind? What do you carry after something like that? Leave it below, because Pamela Wilson has carried it since January 9th, 2019, and she deserves to be heard too. 8:18 p.m., January 9th, 2019. The driveway of 1600 block Midway Avenue, Caddo Heights, Shreveport, Louisiana. Shatari Elise Payne is outside. She is in uniform. She is moving toward her patrol car. She has her keys. She has her radio. She is 7 hours away from the end of a shift she has not yet started. A car is waiting. The shots come fast. 3 of them. Shatari is struck multiple times. 1 bullet enters the back of her head. The shooting is over in seconds. She goes down beside her patrol car, in her driveway, in her uniform, on the street where she lived. Inside the house, her 2-year-old daughter is unaware. Officials would later state they believe the child did not witness what happened in that driveway. She was inside. She was safe from seeing it, but her mother was already bleeding on the concrete outside. Years later, in a Caddo Parish courtroom, firearms and fingerprints expert Michael Stelly took the stand and walked the jury through the physical evidence. Bullet fragments recovered from Shatari Payne's body were forensically matched to a Glock, a weapon belonging to Lawrence Pierre. Additional bullet evidence recovered at the scene was tied directly to a weapon connected to Trevion Anderson. 2 guns, used on 1 woman in her own driveway. Within minutes of the last shot, Glenn Frierson sent a text message to Trevion Anderson. 2 words, "Come over here." That text message was later entered into evidence at trial. And then Trevion Anderson picked up his phone, not to check on Shatari, not to call for help in the first desperate seconds, and dialed 911. He told the dispatcher that his girlfriend had been shot. He told them he had been inside the house when he heard gunshots. He said he ran outside and saw a person wearing all white clothing, a stranger, someone he did not know. He said he fired back at this person to drive them off. He said he then found Shatari wounded. That was his story. That was what he handed to the Shreveport Police Department on the night of January 9th, 2019. 54 first responder units responded to Midway Avenue. 54. The scene was flooded with law enforcement, paramedics, fire units, all converging on a single residential street in Caddo Heights. Officers found Shatari Payne on the ground outside her patrol car, critically wounded, still in the uniform she had put on less than an hour earlier. She was transported to Oxner LSU Health Shreveport. She died at that hospital approximately 2 hours after the 911 call. Trevion Anderson was taken to a detective's office that same night. He sat down. He gave his statement. The man in white, the gunshots he heard from inside, the way he ran out and fired back to protect Shatari. He gave them all of it, composed, detailed, and entirely constructed. Investigators listened, and then they released him. He walked out, pending further investigation. But the moment Anderson left that office, the story he had given them was already coming apart. The crime scene did not support a mystery shooter in white clothing firing from outside the property. The physical evidence at the scene, the bullet trajectories, the forensic details, the geography of the driveway itself, did not line up with the account Anderson had provided. Detectives knew it. They began pulling the digital trail, phone records, cell tower data, text message logs, and what they started finding changed everything. Then the case broke open completely. Lawrence Pierre, Anderson's own cousin, the same man who had received the text message the night before, reading "Let's knock it out tomorrow," agreed to speak to investigators. The interview was recorded on video. Pierre told detectives that he was present. He told them he witnessed Trevion Anderson shoot Shatari Payne multiple times. He stated that Glenn Frierson had accompanied him to the location and left with him after the shooting. And Pierre told investigators something else, that after it was done, he was the one who took the gun and hid it. Police acted on that information. They located a .40 caliber handgun, the weapon believed to have been used in Shatari's murder, at a nearby residence. They had the weapon. They had a witness. They had a crumbling alibi. And they had a digital trail that was only going to get longer. On January 15th, 2019, the same date Shateri Payne was supposed to pick up the key to her new apartment. All three men were in custody. Trevion Anderson, Lawrence Pierre, Glenn Frierson, arrested within 6 days of the murder. Shreveport Police Chief Ben Raymond stood in front of cameras and addressed the city. He called them, and these are his exact words, three evil cowards. He also said this: "This is a small sense of relief because the fact is, a young lady, a young mother, a young daughter, a young officer in the prime of her life was killed in a senseless act of violence. A small sense of relief, because a relief is not the same thing as justice, and justice, the full weight of it, still had to be built, piece by piece, from the evidence left behind. And the most devastating piece of that evidence was not a gun. It was not a text message. It was the search history sitting inside Trevion Anderson's phone. Searches he made before January 9th, some of which he tried to delete, and some of which survived anyway. What was on that phone is coming in the next act, and once you hear it, you will understand exactly how calculated this was from the very beginning. While Shreveport was still processing the loss of one of its own, investigators were sitting in a room with 3 cell phones: Trevion Anderson's, Lawrence Pierre's, Glenn Frierson's. Bossier Parish Sheriff's Captain Shannon Mack is a digital forensics expert. Her job is to go inside a phone and find everything. The messages sent, the messages deleted, the searches made, the towers pinged, the timestamps burned into every action taken on that device. She downloaded the data from all 3 phones and began working through it. What she found on Trevion Anderson's phone did not read like the record of a grieving boyfriend. It read like a planning document. Before January 9th, before Shateri Payne was shot in her own driveway, Trevion Anderson had been using his phone to search. Captain Mack presented those searches to the jury, one by one. Here is what was on that phone. What happens when you shoot someone in the leg? Gunshot wound to the arm. Can you die from a gunshot to the leg? Shooting insurance. Does AFLAC pay for gunshots? Accident insurance. Insurance coverage of shooting accidents. He was not searching for how to treat a wound. He was not preparing for a threat against himself. He was searching for what a gunshot injury looked like from the outside, and whether it could be passed off as an accident, whether someone could file an insurance claim after it, whether the money would come through. He was thinking about the money before Shateri was in the ground. Some of those searches had been deleted from the phone. Anderson had gone back in and tried to remove them. But deletion on a smartphone does not mean gone. Not to a forensic examiner with the right tools. Captain Mack recovered what had been wiped. The jury saw all of it. There was more. A phone was found hidden under a mattress at a residence connected to the suspects. Investigators recovered deleted text messages from that device as well. And when Captain Mack laid out the complete picture, the cell tower data, the timestamps, the recovered texts, the location pings, she was able to reconstruct minute by minute exactly where Anderson, Pierre, and Frierson were in the hour before the shooting, all 3 of them, at or near Midway Avenue. 30 minutes before Shateri was shot, coordinating, messaging, tracking. If the phone Anderson carried with him everywhere had recorded the entire conspiracy. He just did not know how much of it would survive. I want you to look at that list and tell me, not what you think about the case, but what you think that list tells you about the mind of the person typing those searches. Leave it in the comments, because that question matters more than people realize. April 2022, 3 years and 3 months after January 9th, 2019. Caddo Parish District Court, Shreveport, Louisiana. Jury selection was set to begin on the morning of April 4th, 2022. The courtroom held Trevion Anderson, 29 years old by now, Glenn Frierson, 41, and Lawrence Pierre, 24, who just before the first juror could be questioned, walked up and changed everything. Pierre entered a guilty plea to second-degree murder, on no negotiation on the charge itself. He pleaded his charge. He was sentenced immediately. Life in prison without the possibility of parole, probation, or suspension of sentence. In exchange, the conspiracy charge against him was dismissed, and Pierre agreed to testify against Anderson and Frierson when called. Before he was escorted out, Lawrence Pierre turned around in that courtroom. He faced his own family on one side. He faced Shateri Payne's family on the other. And he said he was sorry, that he was sorry for putting all of them through this. Then he was gone. Life in prison. 24 years old. Anderson's attorney moved immediately. He asked Judge John Mosley to suppress 3 letters. Letters that Trevion Anderson had written himself, addressed to the Caddo Parish District Attorney's Office, in which Anderson allegedly admitted his role in the murder while trying to negotiate a plea deal. Judge Mosley ruled the letters inadmissible, protected as plea negotiations under the law. The jury would never read them. Anderson's own words about his own crime kept from the people deciding his fate. The trial ran 11 days. On one day alone, 8 separate witnesses took the stand. The jury heard the text message from the night before. "Let's knock it out tomorrow." They heard the 2-word text Frierson sent Anderson minutes after the shooting. "Over here." They heard Corporal Stephen Gibson describe Shatteri's emotional urgency to find a new apartment. They heard Captain Shannon Mack walk through the cell tower data, the location pings, the deleted messages, and the Google searches. They heard the firearms testimony from Michael Stelly matching the bullet fragments to Pierre's Glock and to Anderson's weapon. They heard the timeline reconstructed from 3 phones. 30 minutes of coordination before a woman in uniform was shot in her own driveway. Pierre was subpoenaed to testify. He took the stand. And then he invoked his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, refusing to answer questions put to him by the prosecution. The defense used that refusal to argue the jury should draw conclusions from it. The prosecution pushed back. And when Anderson later appealed his conviction on exactly that basis, the Louisiana Appeals Court was direct in its response. The evidence against Anderson was so overwhelming that Pierre's silence on the stand added nothing of consequence. The conviction stood on its own weight. Glenn Frierson's wife and daughter testified on his behalf. They told the jury he did not even know Trevion Anderson. The jury acquitted Frierson on both the murder charge and the conspiracy charge. He walked out of that courtroom. On April 20th, 2022, the jury returned its verdict on Trevion DeMarcus Anderson. Guilty. Second-degree murder. Guilty. Conspiracy to commit second-degree murder. On May 31st, 2022, Judge John Mosley sentenced Anderson to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder. He added the maximum 30 years for the conspiracy conviction, and he ordered the sentences to run consecutively, not together, one after the other. Anderson filed an appeal in June 2022. He argued his constitutional rights had been violated. He argued the evidence was insufficient. He argued his attorney had failed him. In September 2023, the Louisiana Appeals Court denied every single argument. Everyone. The language in that ruling was clear. A rational jury, presented with this evidence, could only have reached one conclusion. Trevion DeMarcus Anderson will die in prison. But here is the question I want to leave in this act, and I want you to answer it honestly in the comments below. One of the 3 men named in this case, placed at that location by cell phone data, identified in the digital record, walked out of that courtroom acquitted. Glenn Frierson faced identical charges to Anderson and was found not guilty on both counts. Does that verdict sit right with you, given everything the investigation uncovered? Tell me why or why not. I want to read your answers. May 31st, 2022, Caddo Parish District Court, Sentencing Day, where before Judge John Mosley handed down his ruling, one person was given the floor. Lakeitha Nash Hudson, Shatteri's mother, stood before that courtroom and read her victim impact statement aloud. Into the record, into the room where the man who took her daughter sat and listened. These are her exact words entered into the public record of that proceeding. This has destroyed our family. It will never be the same. To the world she was Officer Payne, but to me she was Lies. I talk to her every day and I can't just call her. Still, I pick up the phone to call her, even though I know she won't answer. She continued, her baby girl graduated kindergarten last week and her mommy wasn't there. She tries to hold on to the memories she has of her mom. I lost my child, but her baby lost her mom, her dad, and even her grandmother, because now her grandmother has had to become mom. Sit with what Lakeitha Nash Hudson just said. Shatteri's daughter lost her mother on January 9th, 2019. She lost her father the moment Trevion Anderson was sentenced to spend the rest of his life behind bars. She lost her paternal grandmother because that grandmother has now had to step into the role of mother herself, raising a child whose parents are both gone in entirely different ways. One dead, one imprisoned. One little girl left standing in the space between. An entire family structure, built, broken, and buried. Because one man decided that if he could not keep Shateri, no one else would have her either. The city of Shreveport did not let her disappear into a case file. In 2020, a three-piece monument was unveiled in her honor. It includes a statue of Shateri in her police uniform, the same uniform she was wearing when she was shot. It includes a Shreveport Police Department badge engraved with her date of birth and her end of watch, January 9th, 2019, and a third memorial element completing the installation. It stands, permanently, in the city she swore to protect. The city of Shreveport also applied, on behalf of Shateri's family, for benefits from both state and federal programs that exist specifically to support the families of fallen law enforcement officers. The family was eligible for up to $500,000. Shateri Payne's case does not exist in isolation. It sits at the crossing point of two realities this country has been confronting for decades without resolution: the killing of law enforcement officers, and the killing of women by the men they are trying to leave. She did everything that advocates tell survivors to do. She confided in people she trusted. She told her mother. She told her grandmother. She told her colleagues, officers of the law, people trained to assess risk. She secured a new apartment. She paid the deposit. She had a date. She had a plan. And she was still dead 6 days before that plan could protect her. Her field training officer told investigators she was faster to learn than almost anyone he had trained. Her colleagues offered to help her find apartments. Detective Gatson told her directly to get out. Corporal Gibson said he could hear the urgency beneath her words every time she spoke about leaving. Her grandmother, Pamela Wilson, knew Anderson had threatened to kill her before he let her go. And the people around Shateri were not blind. They were not indifferent. They saw it. They said it. They offered help. And there was no mechanism, legal, institutional, or procedural, that moved fast enough to stop what Anderson had already set in motion. That is the question Shateri Payne's case forces into the open. Not just what happened on Midway Avenue on January 9th, 2019, but what happens in the space between a threat being made and a threat being carried out. What happens when a person says, out loud to the people who love them, that their partner has told them they will be killed before they are allowed to leave? What does the system do with that? What are we, as communities, prepared to do with that? Shateri Elise Payne graduated from the Shreveport Police and Fire Training Academy on November 16, 2018, as she was pronounced dead on January 9, 2019. 54 days in uniform, 54 days of a career she had carried as a dream through long days and aching nights. Her own words: the threat that ended her life was not a stranger. It was not random. It had a name. It shared her address. It had been sitting across from her at the dinner table. She stood tall on her dream. She wrote those words herself the night she graduated. The very least, the absolute minimum that we can do is stand tall in her memory and then do something with it. What do you think needs to change? Not in theory or in practice, in how communities respond when someone says they are being threatened, in how institutions support people trying to leave, in what we do when we hear the warning and the clock is already running. Shateri deserves more than grief. One, she deserves action. Tell me what you think that looks like in the comments right now. Officer Shateri Elise Payne, born with a dream, hired July 27, 2018, graduated November 16, 2018. End of watch, January 9th, 2019. Her badge number is on that monument. Her name is in the public record of every court document filed in this case. She will not be reduced to a statistic on this channel. Trevion DeMarcus Anderson, life in prison without parole, plus 30 consecutive years for conspiracy. Appeal filed June 2022. Appeal denied September 2023. He will die inside a Louisiana prison. Lawrence Pierre, life in prison without parole. Sentenced April 4th, 2022, the morning he walked into court and pleaded guilty before a single juror was seated. Glenn Frierson, acquitted of second-degree murder and conspiracy at trial. But he did not walk away clean. In a separate federal proceeding, Frierson pleaded guilty to illegally possessing a firearm and to drug distribution charges. Offenses uncovered when Shreveport police searched his place of business during the investigation into Chatterjee's death. He faced up to 10 years on the firearms charge and 20 on the distribution charge. 3 men, 3 outcomes. 1 woman who never made it to January 15th. If you have stayed with this story from the beginning, thank you. Not for watching, for witnessing. True crime is not entertainment. It is testimony. It is memory. It is the refusal to let a person become a footnote. Chatterjee Payne was on the phone with her grandmother when it happened. The line was muted. Pamela Wilson heard nothing. She did not know in those silent seconds that the granddaughter she had been talking to moments before was already lying on the concrete outside. We were not on that call, but we are here now, and we are listening. If this story reached you, share it. Let someone else hear it. Subscribe to Hidden Motive Crime so you never miss what we cover next. And leave your thoughts below, because on this channel, the comments are not just engagement. They are part of the record. Next week, a case that investigators described in their own words as the most meticulously planned disappearance they had ever encountered. Subscribe now. You will not want to come in halfway through. Rest in power, Officer Chatterjee Alice Payne.